ladies and gentlemen. And we are fortunate that we are having this discussion at this time when there is so much trepidation in the Caribbean with regards to cultural and heritage tourism. However, in order for us to understand and fully address the challenges, we must properly define that segment of the tourism sector. Who owns it? Where are they located? And how can they be used to alleviate the level of poverty in certain sectors of Caribbean societies? In addition to that, we have to look at the value of cultural and heritage tourism to the global tourism sector. It is a growing sector that will provide the Caribbean with tremendous potential for growth. However, we have to be able to understand who the cultural tourists are. They are not the regular hotel tourists. They are unique. They are looking for experiences. They want to experience a place, wake up on mornings and see that they are somewhere. And as a result, this is going to provide the indigenous people in the Caribbean with economic benefits from tourism like they have never felt before. In addition to that now, we have to look at the role of the diaspora in the development of that specific segment. And the roles that we can play is marketing. For instance, we have Gems of the Caribbean where marketing is everybody's business. We do it, but we have to formalize that structure. In the area of investment, some of the cultural heritage tourism assets are owned by indigenous people who do not know the value proposition of those assets. And as such, we have to look at ourselves as investing in these products to bring about greater benefits to them. And thirdly, in the area of skills transfer, we have to be able to transfer our skills to that segment, thereby ensuring that we maximize the potential of that segment to the Caribbean and its people.
Thank you very much, Wilson. You mentioned cultural tourism. I'm going to switch to Jerry. Talk to us about cultural tourism. What does it mean? What is cultural tourism?
When we speak of cultural tourism, of course we have to begin with what is culture. Culture, as most of us would know, is the sum of attitudes, customs, and beliefs that distinguishes one group of people from another. Culture is transmitted through language, material objects, rituals, institutions, art, from one generation to the next. And there's more to it than that, and we'll get into it as we engage each other and interactively here this evening. Heritage, the traditions, the achievements, and beliefs that are part of the history of a group of people. But we have to move culture in the context of looking for the opportunities to optimize the potential of cultural and heritage tourism. We have to move from the old paradigm, where we saw the attractions in the Caribbean, for example, as being beach, sun, toes, food, where primarily the hotels, the taxi drivers, the tour guides, and the government collected the taxes, and the employees at the hotels and the ones who chauffeur the cars are the ones who primarily benefited. And maybe this is the farmers, to some extent, where they utilize the local produce. But we have to go beyond that and embrace the paradigm in which we see our people, all of us, as stakeholders. The farmers, the cooks, the craftsmen, the artists, the singers, the dancers, the athletes who brand and endorse products, the Usain Bolts, the Kiranis of the Caribbean, the managers, the accountants, the promoters, the organizers, all of them, plus others, we must embrace and find ways and means to involve in the process of managing and tapping into what we have as culture and heritage in all its forms, and in all its manifestations.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Shelley, this is where the rubber hits the road. because that's what you're doing. I mean, so the challenges, the expectations, the opportunities are your experiences in this whole culture presentation. When it is said here that you produce over 200 public programs, and of course with a cultural flair of the Caribbean, talk to us about that. Its appreciation and the challenges.
Yeah. So back when we set out, just by way of background, before I was working on Caribbean exclusively, my background was in media and technology, so working for really large international corporations in strategic partnerships, Google, Time Warner, History Channel, in monetization and distribution. So really my vision was about how do we take Caribbean culture and package it, not only domestically or here in New York City, but how do we take that around the world? And using digital transmissions, digital media technologies really was part of that vision. So what we've been able to do, and the other thing is, I am a Caribbeanist, so I've traveled to over 30 Caribbean countries, some dozens of times I've played Mass in the French Caribbean, in the English Caribbean, in Brooklyn, in Miami. So really having a wide scope of the region and sort of the different practices. And being able to take that and package that up over and over again is extremely challenging. And I think a lot of it has to do with, there's this huge gap, right, between, we work a lot, for example, with the Brooklyn Museum, which is just down the road, and we're considered to be not their top Caribbean or partner of color, but their top partner of any kind, right? So we've gone to conferences to present best practices in cultural production and partnerships. But being able to take different assets, whether it's from the Puerto Rican, the Haitian, the Trinidadian, the Jamaican, or even from Europe or from the Caribbean community, whether those communities live here in Brooklyn or sort of in the tri-state area, is sometimes challenging, often challenging, because you don't have necessarily all of the financial support or the domestic, the support from the home countries to help bring these assets here to the diaspora, where you have 13,000 people engaging in Caribbean programming. I think another thing is, there's just sort of like still this gap between generations that really needs to be bridged. So those are some of the things that we've been working on very actively for a number of years, but alas, we're still here and we're still in production.
Okay, I want to toss two questions out to you, and I'm going to leave it to you to decide, who's more comfortable answering which question. But first I want to ask you, if you were to describe culture versus heritage to the layperson, how would you do it? There are two words that are used interchangeably, and I would like you to explain how you differentiate between the two. That's number one. Number two, we're talking about pushing our culture, pushing our heritage, and one of the things we have been accused of is trying to Americanize or sanitize our very culture and our heritage. And I think Jamaica has been very successful in that. I like to consider Jamaica the French of the Caribbean. They're unapologetically Jamaican. This is what you come here, you find here, you take it. If you don't like it, you leave. And they've been successful at doing it. But as I was discussing this with Erwin earlier, he mentioned, it's very true, there's a risk to that. How do we strike the balance between staying true to ourselves and still offering a product that is saleable?
Look at the second one.
No,
Okay, with regard to the second question, what you are really referring to is commodification of cultural and heritage tourism sites. They are in their raw form. They cannot be taken to the market as they are. As a result, they go through a process of transforming them to make them marketable. In other words, their authenticity is being changed so that they could generate revenue for the hotel, for the tourism site owners. However, that can be overdone, and when it is overdone, this is where you have tension and conflict between the property owners and the brokers of cultural and heritage tourism. Because the brokers would want to Americanize, as you say, the cultural and heritage tourism sites, changing it dramatically that it may not share the same kind of history, because cultural and tourism, cultural heritage sites have to do with our history, who we were, what happened on those sites, what plantations, the artifacts, and we must do everything to protect those artifacts because that is who we are. However, we have challenging situations in terms of job creation, in terms of modernizing what we call our tourism products, and as a result, we may very well end up losing the authenticity of these products, who we are, and in the next 10, 15 years, everything in the Caribbean may not be authentic. It's something that you could find anywhere in the world, in America, in Florida. So we will not be able to differentiate ourselves from other tourism products globally.
Amen to that.
You know, just before you go to that, and it's a good point there, and I'd like to ask, and I was hoping there was a microphone I could pass to the folks in the front, because as we celebrate World Environment Day today, I would like to ask you, Riley, to address that as it relates to that whole connection and the possibility of our culture heritage disappearing as it relates to monetizing it and presenting it for it to be marketable.
Thank you. Well, I think what we're all seeking here is balance. We're trying to find that balance. There was, I know many in the audience will remember a professor at the University of the West Indies.
Professor Nurse?
No, he was quite an exponent of culture and the arts and so on. Professor Rex Nettleford, the late Professor Rex Nettleford, used to say that there's a fine line between cultural tourism and a touristic culture. A fine line between cultural tourism and a touristic culture. And I think what we're all saying is that cultural tourism is a good thing, and it is one of the products that we offer because we all agree that sun, sea, and sand are wonderful, and they continue to be a major magnet to draw people to the Caribbean, and they'll probably be for a very long time to come. But it's not the only thing. As people get more sophisticated and more worldly and so on, they've been there, done that, done the fly and flop thing. They come for an experience, which is really what we're talking about. But what they don't come for is an example. This is perhaps one of the most extreme and egregious examples that I can think of, is some years ago when one of our member countries discovered some petroglyphs etched in stone. These things were many tens of decades old, hundreds of years old actually. And someone very kindly, who spotted this, very kindly went with red paint on a brush and outlined them so that the tourists could see them. Ruined centuries of artifacts so that the tourists could see them. That person was confused about the difference between cultural tourism and he was creating a touristic culture. That is the kind of extreme example that you don't often see, but you need to understand it so that we will know what we cannot do. But without a doubt, there is this balance that we must strike. Cultural tourism is about authenticity, it is about who we are, and it is an exponent of that hospitality that we talk about. There's no question that there's an inherent relationship between cultural tourism and hospitality. We invite people into our homes to see more of who we are and where we came from. We mustn't ever lose that authenticity, though, by taking red paint and outlining it so that someone can more clearly understand us.
So if I can just, back to the second question about cultural heritage and assets. So I spent a long time, and of course we're still actively working on this as we speak. So I think one of the things is we, as an organization and as a platform, are always presenting Caribbean culture and heritage authentically. So it's really about curation, right? How do you actually extract different assets from the community and present them to ourselves as well as to new audiences? And that's really what this is about. And really, I think, more and more as we're seeing the world opening up, and there's like a whole trend around Black travel and young travelers. That's what they want. They want to actually have that insider or authentic experience, right? So they want to come and play mass with us. They want to come and, go to the spaces that we're going to, not to just be on a resort where there's, just everything is sort of like packaged for them, and it feels like you're almost, just not having an authentic experience without, getting too much in depth. So rather than going to Sandals, they want to maybe be in an Airbnb and, hanging out with their friends on the Gap and then playing mass in Tribe or, whatever experience, and really feel like they're embedded in Caribbean culture. So eating street food, making sure that they're really up to date on all of the latest, soca tunes and reggae tunes and even, Haitian tunes, and that's really what it's about, right? But I think that there's still a huge opportunity, as you said, Hugh, in terms of education, particularly back home. And, there are a lot of assets here in the diaspora that can be leveraged to actually help fill that gap. So another great example, to your point, is I was a part of an excavation when I was in undergrad at Betty's Hope in Antigua, and got kicked out of school because I asked the professors, why were they bringing the artifacts back home without asking the government? You just can't go into a country and take the artifacts without, having some kind of explicit permission. And I kind of saw what was happening, and I was just like, wait a minute, like, is this really happening? So again, I think that we have to be more engaged, even what's happening in our own backyards, right? Because this has been happening for a really, really long time, and there has to be awareness not only at a government level, but also at a local level. So even we're able to engage with tourists and newcomers that may be coming in, whether they're coming to engage in authentic cultural experiences or they're coming to sort of rip us off of our historic heritage sites.
Thank you, Jerry. I want you to jump in and talk about, share your take on it and the difference.